Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. You are on the Steady Coach, and welcome to a new venture, the Going Steady podcast, featuring me, Yonit Arthur, and audiologist and mind-body coach, Pippa Braund. Now, I'm going to tell you more about Pippa in a moment and about why I think you're going to get so much out of our conversations together. But first, I wanted to tell you about what this podcast is about. So, in this podcast, Pippa and I are going to be taking deep dives into the questions and comments you have about chronic dizziness recovery. We get tons of great questions and comments. And of course, when we are responding on YouTube with a few short lines of text or being bombarded with lots of emails and lots of questions on social media, it's hard for us to take a deep dive and really discuss all the different perspectives and approaches that you might be able to use to help address some of these really challenging issues. So, in this podcast, we're going to pick some of those, and Pippa and I are going to share our perspectives and those of our clients to help you pick and know what all the options are for addressing these issues. Now, the reason that I think you're going to enjoy hearing both of us speak so much is because Pippa is not only a very highly educated audiologist and a very highly qualified mind-body coach. She's been working with me for over a year. Herself also recovered from vestibular migraine using the exact same methods that we talk about here on the Steady Coach. Pippa suffered for 9 years and at one point was so debilitated that she couldn't even walk down a hallway, let alone work as an audiologist. Nowadays, happily, she's back to work as an audiologist for the National Health Service in the UK, and she works with me, helping people as a mind-body coach when they are dealing with chronic dizziness symptoms and other mind-body symptoms as well. I think you're going to really enjoy hearing both of our perspectives. We have different ideas sometimes, things that I haven't shared here on my channel at all. So I know you're going to get a lot out of this, but it's very important to both of us that we know what you think, because we'd like to know if this is something you'd like us to continue. So please leave any comments or questions you have down in the YouTube comments below. And of course, if you have questions you'd like us to address in future episodes, you are more than welcome to leave them there as well. As always, it really helps us if you like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the podcast, leave it a high rating if you think it deserves it. These things help us reach more people. Now, before I go into the episode with Pippa, I also wanted to let you know that Pippa is now going to be leading one of the coaching groups, which is wonderful. So this is all part of the VIP coaching membership that's in my membership community. Currently, I lead 2 coaching groups on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern time, but I know that not everyone can make those times, especially those of you who are in Australia, New Zealand, or time zones that are pretty far removed from mine. Pippa is going to be leading coaching groups on Monday mornings at 9:30 a.m. UK time, making it suitable for those of you in various time zones. And these sessions are going to take place every other Monday starting February 5th. It's all included as part of the same membership as a VIP coaching member. So if you join so that you can attend Pippa sessions, you still get access to mine, and all of the sessions are recorded, so you'll be able to watch them later if you are not able to attend any. So please consider doing that if you feel like you need more help with your chronic dizziness recovery. I will put links to the membership community and to the coaching group sign up below, and you can click there and sign up today to join the very next coaching group, either on Monday at 9:30 a.m. UK with Pippa or 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays with me. All right, please enjoy the very first episode of Going Steady. Yes. Yeah. Wow. So we're starting our podcast with bad parenting advice, admission that our lives are messy, and not commenting and smearing the NHS. Okay. Sounds like a good place to start. So we have some topics, I guess. Do you want me to kind of list the topics that we wanted to talk about today? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. I have it open on a window here, but let's see if I can actually read it because that would be helpful. Okay, so we were going to talk about why people end up with dizziness specifically. So people are kind of asking questions about that. We'll get into that. Another one, what it would do when it's not clear if there's some kind of emotional connection to the symptoms, like symptoms just get triggered by something else, what to do if it's not emotional or clearly emotional. So how do we get started when there's just so much, like an overwhelming, ridiculous amount of information on my channel and on the podcast and all that stuff? How to know when to stop being in a triggering environment or doing triggering activity? And then what do you do when things get worse when you start? So lots of getting started questions today. Yeah. Any one of those jump out at you? Do you want to grab one of those? And I can read the original one and give credit where credit is due to the person who asked it.
The one that I relate most to is the one where it said there are no emotional triggers.
Yeah. Ooh, because, jumping into the deep end right away. We're going straight to emotions. Yeah. People who know us are probably unsurprised by this, Pippa. Okay, so I'm going to read the original question.
Yeah, go for it.
And then, okay. So, okay, where is it? There it is. Okay, so now.h on YouTube, so nao.h, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, asked, this was a comment on one of the videos. I enjoyed watching this. Okay. One thing I'm majorly struggling with is I genuinely cannot muster up any emotions about anything bad that has happened to me in the past. It may be there, but I can't find it. I've done talking therapy to see if I could uncover anything about my childhood that I may have suppressed. Nothing significant found. Again, in adulthood, I have lived a lovely life and I'm living my best life at present apart from my ailments. So where do I go from here? I also suffer with chronic pain and have done for 8 years. So something is going on. I just can't figure out what. Wow. Yeah.
So I was that annoying person who said, the only stressful thing in my life is my dizziness. I have no other problems. If that was gone, everything would be absolutely fine. To the point where if someone suggested to me, like I remember going to a party and this woman said to me with like the best will in the world, when my mum died, I could not use my legs. My legs were paralyzed. I think your dizziness is like that. And I didn't say anything, but I was thinking, yes, but my mum hasn't died. My parents are both alive and fine. I've got 2 grandparents alive. I didn't have any trauma. This makes no sense to me. Like, how could my symptoms possibly be related to that kind of thing? And just,
did it make you mad when she asked that?
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, annoying. Yeah.
That's why I so appreciate this question. Right? I mean, I think we're already 90% of the way there just asking this question and being open to the idea that there is something.
Yeah, she's trying.
Yeah.
She is trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead. What were you going to say?
What my mind, I guess, was probably like if you read the Sarno books, he's not talking about any big life traumas. He's just talking about little everyday things where you don't fully feel the emotions associated with them. And then you end up with symptoms. So he's just talking about examples like, oh, there's a lawyer who puts a lot of pressure on themselves and they're a bit of a worrier, and their wife, they're a perfectionist, you have to get the job done perfectly, and then their wife decides that they might like to have children and then they get back pain. Or somebody retires and then they get back pain. Or someone has children and they love their children, but then they, they're repressing all the big emotions that just come with being a mom. As we mentioned this morning, it can be anger provoking.
Really? Oh, no, I had no anger when my child was screaming at me from atop the pile of clean laundry that I have failed to do anything with this week. Yeah, no, sarcasm, in case anyone didn't pick that up. There were a lot of emotions going on at the moment. But you know what?
Exactly, but
Just
then
like you're pointing out, I couldn't say anything.
yeah.
I had to stay calm and handle the situation and get everyone out the door.
Mhm. Yeah.
Repeat that times a million.
Exactly. And then he also talks about things like, retirement often triggers symptoms. But then he said this thing, which I thought was quite funny. He says, but their problem does not compare to the stay-at-home wife whose husband retired.
I do see that. Yeah. Suddenly, he's home all the time.
To cook for him and wait on him. And yeah, I think that was the implication. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be anything big.
It doesn't need to be anything big. And in fact, wouldn't you say that, I mean, not to say that we don't see people with trauma, but wouldn't you say in our work, Pippa, that many of our clients have had relatively normal childhoods, happy homes, nothing big standing out?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you get other people who have had like way more than their fair share of trauma.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So I'm just really curious because of what you said. You were totally not open to this idea at all. So,
Mm-hmm.
so how did you start to discover then that like what some of your emotional distress was from when there weren't any big signs for you about what they were?
To start with, I couldn't see any patterns at all, but I just kind of wrote down a list of possibilities. And then I started thinking about what a 5-year-old would have a tantrum over, or even younger, because of the way it's talking about. This is completely illogical. It doesn't need to make any sense. What could part of me possibly be feeling angry about? Because if you give like a 3-year-old the wrong colored cup, it's not a big thing. But they go absolutely insane.
Or
It's
the
like,
6-year-old, the wrong color pants, which is what I did today.
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So I kind of started looking for what my inner child could possibly be annoyed about or upset about or scared of, and started journaling about those things, even though I didn't necessarily feel them in the moment.
That's such a great piece of advice because I think, I don't know about you, Pippa, but for me, kind of looking back at my life, I was just in total denial that like, because I kind of saw myself as one thing. I'm just now, I am Yonit here now, adult Yonit today. And adult Yonit today is not mad at anyone from when I was 10 years old. Like, oh, it was fine. They did the best they could. Everything was fine. But I need, that doesn't, as you're saying, it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard for me at the time or that I didn't feel differently at the time. So getting a little bit of separation and saying there's a piece of me or a part of me or my inner child that might feel differently than I do now, just being open to exploring that, I think, is such a good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope that this helps. NAO.H or now.H. I'm sorry again. People's YouTube handles, sometimes I have no idea what they actually mean. So I hope that helps. Yeah. Okay. Well, so since we're already on this topic, what to do when there aren't clear emotional stuff, we're still kind of on the topic of how to get started. So I was wondering if maybe we want to answer the question about like, basically, so this one comes from someone on YouTube whose name I didn't screenshot because I failed to do that. So I will go back and find this person and tag them in the podcast description if I can figure out how to do that. But the question, there were a couple questions in this comment, but one of the questions was, I have watched many of your videos and felt kind of overwhelmed with so much information and not able to start which exercises work for me, or not able to figure out which exercises work for me, I feel like I'm never going to get better. So I know. And, gosh, I hear this one a lot too. I think that's what brings a lot of people to coaching. They just feel like they've got all the information, but they don't know where to implement.
And you can see that, especially there's so much information on your channel now as well.
Oh, I know. I just can't stop. I just can't stop. Just can't stop talking. Which is obviously like is good, because the more I do, the more, the clearer I get and the more information's out there. But at the same time, yes, this happens. So just a little bit of love. I'm sending out a little bit of love to you. I just want you to know you're not alone with this. And normalize that a lot of people feel this way at first. So I just thought, kind of relating back to what you were saying previously, Pippa, and then I would love your take on this too. To me, it seems like when someone feels overwhelmed by the amount of information, like they feel like they know it, but they don't know what to do, I feel like it's a really good opportunity to kind of, again, get that separation between you and that part of you that really needs to know what to do first and needs to have a specific plan, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, we can say it makes complete sense. Of course, you want to have a plan because you're miserable. But sometimes it's those perfectionistic, kind of judgmental, like, I want to crush this parts of us that are involved in the dizziness in the first place. And they tend to show up in situations like this when we're given tons of information and we have to figure out what to do from here. So I tell people, the first thing I tell people is just to do a little experiment in their heads and say, okay, instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed and don't know what to do first, I'll ask them to say something like, there is a part of me that is overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do first. And, or I'll say, and if we want to make kind of even more of a separation, I'll say, there is a part of me that holds overwhelm and confusion. And that it just creates so much more room to maneuver, because then you can kind of get curious and say, okay, first of all, that's not all of me. There are parts of me that feel a lot more laid back about this, but also it creates an opportunity for you to start to ask some questions about what that might mean.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a good tip and gives you more space. And maybe as well, it sounds like this person's getting overwhelmed as well, which some people do with, there is so much I could be doing. There is so much I could be learning. There's so much information on this, and I want to be a perfectionist and get it right and read all the books and watch all the videos, and it's just not possible. And accepting that that's not possible, and maybe putting some limits on how much information they're exposing themselves to and how much they're going to put into this each day, bearing in mind that sometimes less is more.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say? Like, what do you say to your clients when someone is in this position and you say, okay, less is more, set some boundaries. So first and foremost, let's stop obsessively learning. So what do you say to people to help them like start implementing? Like, how do they know what to implement, or how do they give themselves permission, I suppose, really, to implement without knowing for sure exactly what the perfect path is?
I guess it's different for everybody, isn't it? I mean, I like your roadmap to recovery, actually, that you have
in the community.
Yeah.
So to give people some context, basically the roadmap to recovery gives you 3 categories, and it says pick one from each category to do each day. And there are things that are more complicated sometimes, like journaling or going to therapy. And sometimes it's really simple stuff like pause and take a breath. And that can count as the thing that you did that day from that category. So you can kind of calibrate to what seems right to you.
Absolutely. And what seems right to you on that day. Because some days you might feel like you've got the energy for a full-on journaling session. And then some days that just feels overwhelming. And then that's okay. You can pick something that's easier. on that day.
Are you telling me that you didn't recover by doing exactly 33 minutes of journaling every day for 2 years?
Initially, to be honest, I did journal.
Okay.
Of course I did. Yeah, for like an hour as well. Not my 20 minutes. I'd set my 20-minute timer and then I just ignore that. Keep going. My mom started complaining. I've not seen you all evening. You've just been shut away journaling.
What do you think? Do you think that's what got you better? I'm so curious to know your take on it. Do you think it was like the obsessive journaling that got you better or something else?
Oh, well, it's got to be a combination, hasn't it? I mean, the psychoeducation is massive. The journaling definitely helped. Like, no doubt about it. Definitely helped. Meditating and just, I guess, letting go of the fear is massive as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? You make such a good point. So I think if we were to summarize everything that we said, we gave a whole bunch of different advice. But for this lovely person who asked this question, it seems like the real key is fear reduction, not increasing fear. So if something like having to worry every day about doing journaling is going to increase fear, and you notice that creates a lot of tension and stress and worry, then that's not what you should be doing. No. But if it's a relief, like, wow, I'm doing something, I feel agency and I feel like I'm really getting somewhere with this, that's not increasing fear. So that might be a helpful thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Though while saying that, obviously the first time you journal, it does feel quite scary and it does feel like a really scary, intense thing to do. But then, like, I thought you might have tips on that because you do like your cold water plunging, and that to me sounds terrifying. How do you do that?
Oh my gosh.
Energy.
I had to. I can't believe this is coming up already in the first podcast. I was going to have us both pretend to be normal people, but I guess I started the podcast with shoving chocolate in my daughter's mouth while she stood atop a pile of laundry. So I guess, I set the stage there, but I had to, because if I'm going to recommend a lifestyle practice to someone, I'd better know what I'm talking about from experience. So I was like, look, if I am going to make Lynn do this, I'm calling you out by name, Lynn, because you've given me permission. If I'm going to make Lynn do this, then I'd better be willing to do it myself. So I had no choice. It was an act of love for Lynn that brought me to the
How do you stop that being an act of pilot pressure?
Yes.
And then turn that difficult thing into something that's full of messages of safety and calming for your nervous system and making things better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the you can see that, like Nicole Saxon, you've got to do the work. You've got to do the work. And I think it's getting the balance and recognizing some days maybe you can't do the work and other days you can, but you've got to give yourself the push on the days that you can. And
yes,
it's really
such a great question. Yeah. Oh, so, it's you're right. There's a switch in mindset. Obviously, at first I felt like not obligation, but it was out of love for someone else that I did it. But then I sincerely believe I'm doing something healthy for myself, and it feels good to know that I'm doing something hard that I'm going to get through. To me, there's a sense of empowerment from that. So now it's no longer, okay, well, I'm going to torture myself on behalf of someone else. It's that, wow, this is a hard thing. And it is hard to do hard things. And I am going to temporarily suffer from some discomfort, but I don't have to suffer any more than the actual physical discomfort. My mind can be clear, and I'm going to feel really proud of myself afterwards. And that makes it easy to do it. So I wonder if something about what I just said could be applied to journaling.
Absolutely, because there is a certain discomfort with journaling, isn't there? You have to be prepared while you're doing the proper emotional journaling to let the anger go through your body, to let the tears come. It's all part of the process. But then afterwards, you feel like something's been released and you feel calmer and stronger.
Would you mind saying a word about proper journaling? So what, again, I know we're going way into this topic now, but if our YouTube viewer is hearing this and saying, okay, fine, I'll try journaling. A lot of people think journaling is like just narration about their day. So that's not what you're talking about. So can you maybe clarify for her or for him what the issue is, like what you actually do want to do in journaling?
So what you want to do with journaling is look at things that are maybe a bit tricky, a bit sticky, or things that you think maybe could have provoked your inner child, even though your adult is being very serene about it all.
Everything's fine. Whenever it's fine, I let it go. I forgive them. No big deal. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, red flag. When someone says, I had a terrible childhood and my mom was a horrible human being, but I forgive her, it wasn't her fault. I'm like, oh boy. And I'm not saying that people don't necessarily reach that point maybe later on, but preemptive forgiveness prior to processing of your own, like shunting your own feelings aside in the name of forgiveness, I think is a big red flag for me. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. Really good point. Yeah. So then you want to get all the emotions, like you said, you need to process the emotions. And if you don't know where to start, you can think, okay, could part of me be angry about anything that's happened here? And then if they could, then write about what they could be feeling angry about. And then you can kind of feel it and you know when you've touched on something because the pen goes faster and
So it could be, you can just kind of play with it in your imagination. Even if you, the adult, you think there is no way, you just kind of have to open up the door of curiosity a little bit and say, I guess I could be, and just try it on like clothes and just see what comes out.
That's how I do it. I mean, I'm sure there are other ways, but that's how I do it.
I like that.
And then that might sometimes, once that's all been processed, sometimes there's sadness for whatever's been going on. And if I have a good cry, I know that I've had a good journal. And then I kind of put the adult perspective on and let the logical part then come out and say its bit about why actually, it's not that bad. And why it was really pushed before, I suppose. Like in your case, my mum's done the other things that are lovely and I do actually care for her, and the adult head. And then like a few things that I'm grateful for. And when I was dizzy, I'd write something like, I am physically fit and strong, over and over to try and get that message into my brain.
All excellent tips here. So this leads me to the next question that Marianne asked. So, okay, because we're still kind of on this topic of getting started, gaining momentum. Marianne says she started the program. So she started taking the course and doing the things I talk about, and her symptoms got worse. So I see that happen sometimes. I reassured her that I do see that happen sometimes. Just wondering what your take is on that too. And I can certainly share my thoughts, but I'm really curious to hear yours.
So I guess there are different options really, aren't there? So first off, if her symptoms have been stable for ages and then she starts doing the course and then they get worse, then it's shaking something up that wouldn't be shaken up by a physical injury. And so maybe that's really good evidence that actually she's hitting on something here and it is going to work in the long run, even though in the short term it's not. And then, of course, you've always got to wonder, is anything else going on at that time as well? Is this just a coincidence? Has something else happened?
Yeah, you're right. We always kind of assume when we start something that, it's got to be that thing. I know I've heard this so many times, and I'm sure I do this in my own life. It's a natural human thing. Our brains want to make connections and want to have understanding of the world. So sometimes we'll miss what the actual trigger was because we'll think it was the thing that we remember. And I think that's a point that I want to drive home in general, even though this has little to do with the question that we were supposed to be answering, but this is something I think people make some mistakes about, that because they'll assume, they'll make a lot of assumptions about what what has actually triggered them to feel worse or to feel better.
Mhm.
And to me, digging really hard and trying really, really hard to find the answer to that, it often, not only does it create more stress and anxiety, you're often going to miss the thing anyway. So not to say you shouldn't take a look, but I don't know that the answer is to dissect the entire 24-hour period before your symptoms got worse either. So
Mhm.
I guess what I'm getting at is, to me, acceptance in the moment of where you're at is a point you have to reach before you start digging back into the past to try to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would. So I guess if I get a bit of a symptom nowadays, when it's in a different place, obviously, but very occasionally I'll get a bit of a symptom, and I kind of have two steps on it. So one is in that moment trying to not react with fear, and have a little vague think about what it could be, but not getting overly obsessive about it, because then essentially that's one of the Dr. Schubner's 5 F's, isn't it? It's trying to fix it, focus on it, all of that. If you do it for too long, but then if it continues and I'm still not sure what's going on, I will write a list of things as potential issues and then journal about them all and see which seems to be the right one. And I can generally tell when I'm writing.
Right. And that also helps because you've developed a lot of insight and a lot of attunement
It's
to
so
yourself.
much easier. Yeah, it's so much easier now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's different. It's different.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, don't beat yourself up if you're not able to hone in on something right away. It may not be what you think it is. What I think people miss is what I was just saying is actually the goal. It's not necessarily eliminating the source of the stress that happened. Oh my gosh, that's it. There's the thing. It's about how you relate to yourself in general. So even if you pick the wrong stressor to focus on, if you're still focusing on being kind to yourself, calming your nervous system, treating yourself with respect, being open with your emotions, at least with yourself, you're not going to go wrong, even if you don't know which stressor it was exactly.
Yeah. And I love what you say about treating your nervous system like it's a little pet or a 2-year-old at that time, and having self-compassion and just using it as a sign to treat yourself gently and better.
Right. Well, and that kind of brings me back to Marianne's question, right? Because I wonder if for her, and again, this is just based on the question, I wonder if for her there's a lot of shame associated in the increase in symptoms or the not getting better right away when you do the course. And shame is such a danger signal. Shame is such a danger signal when people feel like their acceptance of themselves is only conditional upon them feeling 100%, then my course is going to make them feel worse. It's going to make them feel worse because right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because then the critic comes in and says, you've done this course, why are you not better? Why are you not better? Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Right. And the critic comes in and says, you're not doing this right.
Yes.
You're only in step 1 and reading it. And you're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. And then the critic starts bashing you. And then shame goes up, danger mode goes up, and symptoms go up.
And
So
shame is just an unbearable emotion I'm feeling. It's so deep and so horrible.
It's deep and horrible. And Pippa, I don't typically think of things the way Sarno did in the brain is distracting you from difficult feelings. But this is one time when it comes to shame, I think shame can feel so unbearable that on some level, again, this is not saying that any of you want symptoms at all, but on some level, shame can be so unbearable that I think some people prefer to feel physically ill than to feel like that just they're completely worthless and that they're completely incapable of functioning in the world. And not saying that applies to any people listening to this right now, but I think that's where I do kind of align a bit with how Sarno would explain things, that the symptoms are a distraction from a feeling that is so unbearably painful that people just don't want to feel it.
But also that can be a completely subconscious,
totally
unconscious preference. So you're not consciously aware that that's a preference,
right.
even if it is.
Right, for sure. Yeah. And thank you for pointing that out. Right.
Random part of your brain that's decided I'm going to give you this instead.
Right. Yeah. A random part of your brain, not like you would actually prefer that, but you're a random part of your brain. The neural circuit associated with the dizziness could be making that decision for you.
Absolutely.
So okay. So wow, now we've just leapt right off the deep end into shame. So obviously we could probably do an entire podcast on shame all by itself, but any quick tips for Marianne if shame is playing a role here, or anyone else, what they might be able to do? I do have the video on shame that I can refer people to.
Yeah. And I guess, like you said before, part of me is feeling shame, kind of gives
a little distance,
a little distance from it. But also, like, on a rational level, this isn't your fault. You didn't choose this. Nobody would want this. You wouldn't wish this on your worst enemy. And so, yeah, you don't need to feel that. But
right. Yeah. Amen. So other reasons why starting the course might make people feel worse. I think attention probably has something to do with it. Because if ignoring as a strategy, I have that video on an ignoring and why it's not my favorite strategy. And in general, it's going to backfire. But ignoring is definitely better than sitting around ruminating and being afraid all the time. So if I tell people, okay, now don't ignore anymore, they just lost their coping strategy for the dizziness. And it takes time to build up new strategies. So in the meantime, they're paying all this attention to symptoms when before they were trying to ignore them, and they don't know how to handle them. It's like I took away whatever strategy had been working for them.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess they can't, there obviously is room to ignore them at times if that is the most helpful strategy in that moment, even though you don't want to do it all the time.
Thank you for saying that, because I think I had some comments on that video that I made about ignoring. Like, I have to ignore it when I'm at work. What am I supposed to do? Like, I have to. I said, there is absolutely a time and a place for ignoring. You can ignore them. Don't feel like pushing them away sometimes isn't the right strategy, because it is. It just shouldn't be your like global strategy. If your only strategy is ignoring, then you're not going to get anywhere. But yes, it is okay to ignore the symptoms sometimes. Yeah. So then maybe, Marianne, I hope that helps. And I hope some of the other advice that we gave about getting started also helps, reassuring you that it's not about doing one specific thing. It's about giving yourself permission to explore this, and know that the actual value in the work you're doing is in how you relate to yourself and the symptoms and other people. It's not about finding a specific mode. It's not about finding a specific set of steps, because it's really going to look different for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to say to Marianne before I pop up the next question?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Just okay. I hope it's settled down now, and I hope she's. Yeah. Okay. So this actually is quite related, because we were just talking about ignoring. So this was on the video about ignoring. And this question comes to us from PTLAM. So PTLAHM on YouTube. And this commenter asks, I was hoping you would say something about how to know when to stop doing the exercises or being in the triggering environment, and when to just keep on with the activity. What you did cover was helpful. So liked the video, but said, hey, like, how do I know when to stop doing a triggering activity
or being in a triggering environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to just say my piece, Pippa, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. It just relates so well to what I was just talking about when I was responding to Marianne and saying, I'm sorry, I hate saying super cliche things like this is a journey or this is a process, not a goal, or like, I don't know. Now I can't even come up with the appropriate cliche. This is a journey, not a destination. That's it. Pippa's staring at me like, what is she talking about? This is a journey, not a destination. I'm sorry, again, to use a cliche like that, but ultimately the process of creating safety is an ongoing process. It's not a goal. So, it's not about going to a triggering environment and like checking that off the list. It's not about going into a triggering situation and triggering symptoms and then checking that off the list and saying, okay, I did the thing. And now my brain has, and now like the result of that is my brain will learn that thing is no longer dangerous. That's part of it. And I'm talking about this in an upcoming video. But the other piece is, in doing that, the actually important thing isn't about the environments or the triggers or the symptoms at all. It's about your ability to respond to your own nervous system in a way that creates safety. And that is a skill. It's a process. It's an active thing. It's a verb. It's not I'm going into this triggering environment in order to trigger symptoms. So my point here is, when you're going to trigger things, so when you're in a triggering environment or doing a triggering activity, when you're doing an exercise, how to know when to stop, you're not going to know when to stop. Your job is to develop a language between you and your nervous system that lets you learn when it's okay to push and when it's not okay to push. And at the beginning, that's going to be super hard because your body is going to respond to everything you do by saying, nope, not doing that. So on some level, there's you're not going to be able to believe every no that you hear from your nervous system, but you need to be able to work with the no's and also learn to listen for the yeses. So even if a triggering situation brings up symptoms, which might, again, you might think of as a no, you might also get a sense that actually, I'm safe. The symptom sucks and I don't like it, but there's also a yes going on here and I'm listening for that so I can start to respond to my nervous system appropriately. So long story short, there is no specific point at which you're supposed to stop a triggering activity or being in a triggering situation. It's every time you do something like that, it's an opportunity to create a better connection between you and your nervous system so that you can continue to adjust. And that attunement to yourself is what actually creates safety.
Yeah.
I hope that was clear. And I'm so glad you're here, Pippa, because sometimes I'm talking by myself and I have no idea if I'm making sense. And I have no one to clarify anything that I'm saying or ask questions. So please, first of all, tell me if that was clear at all, what I just said.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I think that actually it isn't about the symptom itself. It's about whether you're feeling that there's a yes here, as well as the symptom, about the energy that you have in that situation. And I don't know if you've, the Alan Gordon's little story about flights.
No, please share.
It's in the way
I feel like it's so funny. It's like the fact that you keep referring back to them. It makes me feel like we're like disciples of these great teachers, like on high, and like we're quoting like, and the great Dr. Schubiner says, and the great Alan Gordon says. I love this. This is just so much fun. Anyway, please continue. That's your story.
Actually, Alan Gordon stole it off Christy Whoopi because
we all steal each other's stories. Yes,
actually happened to her, but he turned it into a story. So what he says is, we're essentially trying to get over a fear, and if you never expose yourself to the source of the fear, then you can't get over it. So he says, if you were scared of flying and you never got on a flight, you could never get over your fear of flying. You just couldn't do it. If you were scared of flying and you got on the flight and you had a really smooth flight and you watched the in-flight movie and you got off at the other end and thought, oh, actually, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, then you would then be less scared of flying. So that would be a corrective experience. You reduced your fear. But if you got on that flight, and apparently something similar happened to Christy, where someone was panicking next to her and they said the wing was going to break or something, but I changed my story for my patients. I say, so say if you got on the flight and there was turbulence and the oxygen mask got dropped down and everyone was screaming, we're all going to die. You get off that flight a lot more scared of flying than you were before. So it's about judging whether you're going to have a good flight or a bad flight. And it depends on what mood you're in. So some days if you're feeling nice and strong and positive and you've had a good sleep and you go into an environment and you feel symptoms, you feel sensations, whatever you want to call them, then you feel okay with that. You're like, yeah, okay, it's all right, but I still actually want to be here. And then you can just carry on and let the symptoms be there and not leave. And then that in that situation, you're having the smooth flight and you're teaching your brain, actually, this is a safe sensation. We don't need to be driven by this. We don't need to avoid it. But if you notice yourself going, oh my God, I want to get out of here. This is just hell. I don't think I can bear this anymore. Then you're essentially having the traumatic flight. And so if you carry on pushing yourself in that situation, you could come out, you can't possibly, when you're in that frame of mind, look at the sensation through a lens of safety. You're going to look at them through a lens of danger. And so in that situation, you want to, with self-compassionately, without criticism, stop triggering and just leave the situation.
That is so good. I was listening to that answer. I'm like, that is so much more concrete and clear than what I said. So thank you so much for that. So basically then what you're saying, just to really boil it down, is the symptoms aren't necessarily a nervous system. No, they're not. It's about your ability to look at your feelings and your responses in general and say, is that a no or is that a yes? Knowing that there's a spectrum. There may be a yes, maybe. It may not be a yes, we're doing this. And a no, maybe no, or it might be maybe. There may be a maybe. But that's what we're paying attention to, not necessarily the symptoms.
Absolutely. And it's like what you were saying before, that it is a skill.
That's a skill.
It is a skill that you can learn to know more easily when it's a yes and when it's a no.
Brilliant. I'm very pleased with us. Right now, I knew starting a podcast together would be an amazing thing. So let's finish off our first episode with this doozy of a question. I may regret this in 20 minutes, but this doozy of a question. Why dizziness? So we got two questions that related. So Blaine Bostock asked this on YouTube, and we got the second one from Condos 2009. So both of them asked similar questions. So Blaine asked, does the brain send out a false alarm of dizziness as a way to get you to move away from perceived threat, rendering you helpless, almost like playing possum? I'm not clear on why dizziness per se and not pain. And then Condos asked, why is my body making me dizzy at perceived threats? How would making me dizzy help me in a threatening situation? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to field this one or?
So I'll start with the first one. And why not pain? So for me, it started with pain. And I think this is different for everybody, isn't it? Essentially, like, has your brain learned dizziness somewhere else? Like, did you have PPPD and learn what dizziness is? And then your brain just generates that because it's learned it, or it'll be different for different people. But for me, I started with pain, but I could just ignore that. I could just push through that. So I had like 15 years of a headache most days, and then a year of knee pain. So my brain tried the pain strategy, but that didn't work. It didn't make me stop. It didn't get me to work on what I needed to work on, I guess. And I remember your interview with Christy Weepy. She said the same thing, didn't she?
Yeah.
It's with pain, but then it was the dizziness that made her stop. And I think, as you often say, it's the symptom that gets your attention and that you have the most fear associated with.
Yes, that's a big point too. This is not, when people hear the word fear, they're like, it's not that I'm afraid of it. It's that I'm like an anxious wreck when it happens. And so this is not.
I mean, by fear,
Right.
we're including frustration, anguish, annoyance, dismay, anxiety,
Yes.
anything else that's making you feel more danger rather than less danger. So it's not just fear by any means. And for me, I felt it as frustration. But yeah.
Yes. And it's not their faults. I mean, it's not your fault, because dizziness has fear built in. It happens. Everyone who has dizziness, whether it's a neural circuit problem or not, it's going to light up your fight or flight system. I've talked about this extensively, but your ability to orient yourself is probably the most basic sense that your body requires for survival. Like, forget food and water. If you can't orient yourself in space and you're like a little one-celled organism, you're going to die. You're going to get eaten. You're not going to be able to find food if you can't orient yourself. So orientation, your ability to balance and again, be oriented in your environment, that is fundamental. So your brain knows this, and it will activate your fight or flight system very intensely when you are feeling dizziness. So the problem is, like you're saying, Pippa, first of all, the symptom itself is dysregulating. And the second thing is that you probably already are on top of that reacting to it with a lot more fear, frustration, annoyance, anguish than you were to a different symptom that might have already occurred. And Pippa, I don't know, what percentage of your clients would you say had some other symptom before they developed dizziness?
Oh, all of them, maybe? I don't think of anyone who hasn't had.
Yeah, like tension headaches.
Yeah, tension headaches, IBS. And then you get people who, I mean, particularly with tinnitus, they'll come with this great big, crazy list. And there's the back pain, there's the fibromyalgia, there's and I'm sure lots of the dizziness have a list as well. But I think with dizziness, maybe less all at once, because the dizziness is taking away the focus from all the other stuff.
Right.
The other stuff maybe doesn't need to be there as much.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Same. I mean, look, and we're not saying that all things are like big mind body syndromes, but your body may have already tried other stuff out on you and it didn't work. Like you were saying,
everybody has mind body syndrome at some time. Everybody has, who's never had a tension headache.
Right. It's just, this is just more extreme and chronic. And that's where people really, really start to struggle. So I guess piggybacking on what you said also, though, that some people have a template for dizziness. So to answer this question, really for both of them, for Blaine and Condos, for some people, you were unlucky enough to have some kind of vestibular event or some kind of biological inclination toward a vestibular problem. So you were set up for mind-body syndrome. And if you happened to have at that point injured your back, you could have ended up with back pain. But it happens that you developed dizziness for some other reason. And it may have been not normal dizziness, but about a quarter of people have episodes of dizziness at least at some point during the year. This is a statistic from the US National Institute of Health. So this is not a like, oh my gosh, I had to go to the hospital type of dizziness, but dizziness is a very common sensation. Most people report having dizziness at some point. So it doesn't take much if you have maybe a little cold going on and your ears a little clogged and it's not quite functioning as well as it could, and you have a little more dizziness than normal, but your brain is on super high alert mode. And it just happens that cold hits, even if there's no ear damage or anything, just at that time when you're most vulnerable. That's when people can end up with dizziness. So it's not that your brain is trying to make you dizzy specifically, Like, it's like, oh, I'm going to send you this dizziness so that you lie down and escape from the danger. That you're right. That makes no sense. It's that the danger signal is lighting up this dizziness circuit as almost a side effect. It's the dizziness is wired into the danger response kind of accidentally, not because the brain's trying to make you dizzy to protect you.
Mm-hmm. Your brain's trying to, your brain is trying to protect you, but yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right, but the protection is the dizziness is what you see. The dizziness is the symptom that you see. You're not seeing the protection circuit or the fear response or fight or flight circuit activated. The dizziness is kind of the it's what you're actually seeing. It's not that it is the circuit that's protecting you. The dizziness isn't trying to protect you necessarily. If, in other words, if that makes sense, if we're going to personify it. Anything else to add there? Do you agree with what I just said, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just making sure I got the second part of that question. Yeah. So in other words, feeling dizzy does not necessarily help you in a threatening situation, but I do want to say that sometimes with clients, they do find the dizziness is helping them. And they have to be really kind of in a very different place to look at things this way. But I've heard clients tell me, so this is not coming from me. I've heard clients tell me things like, if I weren't dizzy, then I'd have to go back to being perfect all the time again. Or if I weren't dizzy, then I'd actually have to say no instead of blaming the dizziness.
Yeah.
And again, this is not from me.
Self-awareness, isn't it?
That takes a lot of self-awareness.
And a lot of courage to admit that.
Right.
As well.
Right.
Like,
and so we're not putting this on either of you. I'm not saying your dizziness is trying to do anything special for you, but sometimes it does seem to actually play some kind of protective role. It's just not always clear what it is at first.
And if it is, then that would be completely, again, some weird part of your brain that is unconscious, and it wouldn't be you as a person thinking, oh, I'd like an excuse to get out of this. That's not what you're saying at all, just to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. No. And I would never, I mean, these are things people have told me. This isn't me saying, you're just trying to stop saying no, aren't you? No, people have actually come to this conclusion and told me this. So yeah, I think it's just worth saying here while we're talking about this, that it's perfectly fine to just kind of think of the dizziness as a side effect of the fight or flight response and not playing a protective role. But that for some people, there may be some kind of protective component. We just don't know what it is.
Yeah. And so in terms of does my brain think it's safer for me to just lie down? And I think like the PRT theory is that your brain believes you're in danger because you've got all this stress going on, you've got all these chemicals going on. And so when you're in danger, it's on the lookout for danger signals more. So it's more likely to make a mistake because it's erring on the side of caution in terms of, is this a danger? Isn't this a danger? Well, it probably is because I think I'm in danger. So then it amplifies the dizziness and makes you feel dizzy because it believes that you're in danger, and dizziness is a danger signal.
Right. Yes, exactly. So it's not that the dizziness is protecting you by being dizzy. It's that your brain's protecting you by giving you a very loud danger signal, which to tell you to like go somewhere safe and be there and not be around all this threatening stuff. Thank you. That's another really great explanation for this that I think will make sense to people. Thank you. Okay. So we've answered all the questions. I think we should wrap it up here. This was fun. So please leave questions or comments below if you have any. And of course, we'll answer questions in future episodes of the podcast. So if we think your question would be applicable to other people, we will answer it in our next episode. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And please hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening to this as a podcast, please follow the podcast. That'll help us reach more people and grow it. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye. See you soon. Bye.